what is your mission? What are you trying to do and accomplish? See what your efforts contribute to within your space, because it's going to look different for a parks organization compared to an arts, compared to environmental, compared to social service based, basic needs, financial stability, whatever that might look like. But it gives you that opportunity for your organization. How are you trying to move the needle, shift things from a bigger perspective?
Welcome to Grant the Mic, the podcast where we amplify the voices shaping the world of grants, nonprofits, and social impact. I'm your host, Allison Boyd, the founder of Boyd Grants. If you've been in the world of nonprofits for any amount of time, you've probably heard phrases like metrics, impact, and outcomes tossed around a lot. But what do they really mean? And how do we move beyond counting outputs, like how many people attended a program, to truly measuring what changed because of that work? So that is exactly what we're diving into today, how to measure what really matters. And today's conversation is all about turning data into insight and insight into storytelling that moves funders, stakeholders, and communities alike. So joining me today are two brilliant women who live and breathe this work every day. First up is Jessica Davison. She is the Assistant Vice President of Mission and Strategy at the United Way of Greater Houston. Jessica works with both internal and external partners to design, implement, and evaluate program effectiveness. She Jessica, are you still the vice president or president-elect at Texas Evaluation Network, or?
No, I'm not. I'm not. I've rolled off the board now. I've served my 6 years, my 2 years, 3 terms, that good stuff. And so I'm just a good old-fashioned member of Texas Evaluation Network.
Well, I wasn't sure. I saw it and then I was like, oh, I forgot to check with that. But her work really centers around improving how organizations govern and sustain data collaboration across networks of funded partners. And y'all, she brings so much knowledge about building systems that actually work. When I first met her, I thought, she's my person and she gets it. And I loved everything about meeting her. So I'm excited to share her with y'all. And then also joining us is Rachel Scott. She is the Principal Evaluation Associate at the University of Mississippi's Center for Research and Research Evaluation. She leads projects focused on K through 12 education, philanthropy, and nonprofit capacity building, particularly across the U.S. South. And her approach is all about using evaluation for decision-making and not just reporting. I am currently working with her on a project, and she brings so much wealth to this project and wealth of information and knowledge and just the ability to give feedback from the data that comes in through those surveys that you fill out at the end of things. She just puts it into beautiful presentations and helps us to understand the impact that we're having. So y'all, today, Jessica and Rachel are some of the best people to help answer some of the hardest questions in our field. And one of those questions is, how do you measure impact when you're trying to change is complex, human, and long-term? Okay, so let's start, if y'all don't mind, with the first really big question of today, and it's about both of you. How did you find yourselves drawn to evaluation and measurement in the first place? Jessica, do you want to go ahead and start?
I was waiting to see. I was like, who's going to jump first? So I am definitely in the category of folks who have fallen into evaluation. It was not my school of trade of like learning in college. It was more just this desire to understand impact and what that looks like for mission-driven organizations. I started as like a direct staff member doing family counseling in a juvenile drug court in Louisiana. And so that family therapy, that therapeutic modality was very much the space I was in and trained in. But I was always curious of like, what else does it look like for the participant, for the family? You know, we were engaged with them in the school setting, engaged with them in the juvenile justice setting, their family dynamics, like really bringing in all that information to see what does that look like for that youth and that participant as they continue on in the program and even outside of the program. And so that always was like a through line for me of like, well, what does that impact look like for that family and that person? And that just carried with me all around as like I've really been in this nonprofit setting and space, like looking at what does impact and measurement mean for the organization, the mission they're trying to accomplish, always with that like direct service hat on of what does this mean for the staff that are doing this work?
So, Rachel, what drew you in?
So really similar. I also came from the programmatic side. My background is in K-12 education. I was a school and I was a teacher, school administrator, district administrator, but I had a grant. And one of the things when you get a grant, they frequently tell you, well, you have to have an evaluator, or you need to have, you're going to do this evaluation report. And I quickly kind of wanted to move beyond just doing the evaluation to turn in the report for compliance because it was such a big undertaking. And if I was going to invest that amount of energy, like let's invest that energy and have it help me make decisions that I'm going to have to make anyway. And so can I reduce that burden by like having this report count for two things? One, it informs my decision making. And then two, I check that box that I have to do for the funder because, everyone wants accountability and good stewardship. And the other thing, and kind of, I guess this may be jumping ahead a little bit, like there's a lot of numbers in evaluation, but that doesn't really speak always really well to people in the community. Like they, the number or the metric aren't the stories. Like they're not the compelling tagline. And so kind of that bridge. And so when there was an opportunity for me to transition roles and come to the University of Mississippi and the Center for Research Evaluation and be a full-time evaluator, I said, I want to do that. And because I had found a way to make it valuable, I had worked with some really good evaluators who kind of like bought into that idea. That's the type of services I wanted to provide.
So that is so interesting how you both came to it. Evaluation and impact of measurements and things for me really was based on I, being the grant professional, needed people to tell their story better, right?
Yeah.
Needed to drive what the true need is and how did you determine that and things like that. And it wasn't until I started working with the United Way and had to go through and explain to potential organizations for receiving of grants that I realized how much people don't understand the impact of the work that they do because they show up, they do the work and they're like, oh, well, we don't see that person again. Well, what happens between now and then? And then how do we tell your story and how do we embed it to the organization as a whole? So I came at it as a whole different thing. And I look at it a little bit different than the two of you do, because I'm like, how do I use your numbers to tell your story? And where's the gaps in that? So talking about that, how do you define impact in the context of grants as a whole? So Rachel, we'll start with you first.
Okay, so I think impact is really that change in conditions, capacity, opportunity, outcomes that is beyond the life of just the grant. So it's not just the immediate. A lot of times in kind of evaluation space, you hear people talk about outputs and outcomes and then impact. And so I always think like outputs are those things that you're counting as activity volume, you serve this many people. Outcomes is that almost like that evidence of progress. You're seeing these changes in behavior, in situations, in capacity, and that impact is really getting to that lasting difference. And so I see them almost as like a continuum and a progressive. Impact is a little bit more ambiguous and kind of hard to understand or explain. Outcome, also a little bit more ambiguous. Outputs, like we can count it, we can measure it. And so kind of each one getting a little bit bigger, but capturing that idea of lasting difference, change in people's lives, really something that is not just bound to, I did this thing in a grant.
I love that because it mirrors how I think about impact, and the word ambiguous is such a great way to think about impact because we all have like outputs, outcomes, like different funders have different definitions of that, or you have your own internal language of what is an output, what is an outcome. But impact to me is that like, let's take a big old step back and look organizationally. What is your mission? What are you trying to do and accomplish? See what your efforts contribute to within your space, because it's going to look different for a parks organization compared to an arts, compared to environmental, compared to social service based, basic needs, financial stability, whatever that might look like. But it gives you that opportunity for your organization. How are you trying to move the needle, shift things from a bigger perspective for your organization? And that's where that like ambiguous comes in, because it's like, well, what are your programs doing? What is that commonality that y'all all have? Or maybe there's not a commonality, but you all are under this one umbrella of your mission. And so what does your collective impact look like?
I think that's so good, because I think we often in my side of the house forget how important it impacts the entire organization. And yes, we can get really focused on impact for the work that we're doing tied to a specific grant. But really, how does it drive to the change, and how does it drive to your mission and help your organization as a whole? It might be just a piece of it, but what is the piece that drives to your strategic plan, right? Because that should really help move and help determine the goals and objectives that you're writing. And so with that, so what are some key indicators that y'all think nonprofits, general indicators, nonprofits should start tracking if they're like, well, we don't even know what to start tracking. So what are some good standards, do you think, Jessica?
Yeah. I always start with like an inventory of like, what are you currently doing? What are you currently collecting to help you draw upon your standards to find to find the connection points, because it will look different for each organization. And so it is always hard for me. And at United Way, we do have some standardization, but it is around like the common areas that we look at and we consider. So for our financial stability pillar, it is increasing income, increasing savings, acquiring assets as like the top lines. But then what are the activities underneath that are drawing to outputs or outcomes? Maybe it's the number of checking accounts that are open, number of savings accounts, number of individuals that are increasing their savings to $500 if they have that as a goal. And so I think for me, it's like, that's also hard to answer of like, what are like the top ones everybody should be doing? You should be doing about like what is most critical within your program area to really help quantify that. But I often think of like, what's the change in condition and change in status that you're trying to see, and starting from that point.
So then to piggyback on that just a little and change how I asked the question to you, Rachel. So thinking about it being specific to your organization as a whole, how can organizations align metrics with funder expectations and community needs?
So that's a really fun space to be in. And always, when I'm working with an org, I always say, like, let's start at your logic model or your theory of change. And I hate to use evaluator lingo.
But smart. So you just keep talking about it.
I really think that is what I tell groups to do. And like I always advise. And if you don't have one, it's okay. It isn't this really super complex, but start by drawing a picture of, we do these things, or we take these resources, we do these things, we then get these outputs. Like we do this thing and then we give away this many books. We do this much tutoring. I'm thinking of a tutoring program, a logic model. We go into this many schools. Okay, because we did that, we think that these are going to be the short-term outcomes that we're contributing to, that we're seeing more kids read. We're seeing kids have greater reading fluency. Those things mean that kids are going to be closer to reading on grade level in the long term. And so sketching out that picture is really important, because a lot of times people, what they think they're getting at outcome wise or impact wise may actually not be how their program links and what they're leading to. And that's okay. Then you need to think through and say, is that what we're intending to do? I also often advise groups, don't change what you do for a funder. Find a different funder. You find the funder that aligns with what your mission, what your vision is, what your strategic plan is. Because if you keep changing what you do to chase funding, as opposed to finding funders that align with your mission and vision, or kind of like you have that overlap, you're always going to be having to work so much harder, and there's so much burnout, and so much energy that is invested when you have to do that. And so find those mission vision aligned funders that you want to contribute to the things that matter to them. And so look for funders who, if you're doing a reading program, that are supporting grade level reading, or reading fluency. If asset building is really what's important, look for funders that are supporting that and making those funding decisions. Because I truly believe there's enough funders in a space. It just may take a little bit more time to identify those, and kind of get matched up. But to definitely do that. But theory of change, logic model, and really making sure that you're aligned to that. And those are kind of those outcomes you're tracking. And that was a really circular answer. And so I apologize for that. But something that I think is really important.
That's really good.
Yeah, I feel like we need to like normalize talking about logic models, talking about theories of change. Like it's always like potato for some people. Like we don't call it a logic model, but we have this. And it is the same thing. I think there's just this like, what do you already have? What are you already doing? And like connecting those dots in a way to see that you actually are measuring quite a bit of things that matter to you. It's just giving that like support and confidence in them that this is like demonstrating your impact. It's like connecting those dots for them.
Jessica, I'm going to jump in. You hit on something that I think is so critical. Organizations are measuring so many things, and they are tracking so many data pieces that, like, it's shocking. I'm going to say this, they could probably let go of some of them. Because if you're just measuring something to measure it and it doesn't have any meaning, you're not using it to track, an outcome, a metric to satisfy a funder or, an organization that you have a compliance thing for. You may not need to measure it because that's a lot of like time and effort that is being stored, as opposed to doing something really powerful and really meaningful that we do one annual survey, or we say we always ask these 3 questions anytime that we are engaging with the group. So I always encourage people, take that inventory of what all you have, kind of know why you're tracking it, and then it's okay. Like, a little Marie Kondo, you can let it go. If it doesn't bring you joy, that's fine. You may need it again in the future. And so there are data hoarders, people who just love it all and all the pieces of paper or the digital files. But sometimes we measure things just to count them. And we don't need to just count everything.
So have y'all ever do you have a story of working with an organization that has realized, hey, we are collecting data just to collect data, and then made that shift to make it more meaningful data and impact, and saw a better response in maybe funder engagement and how easy it was to do reports and things like that? And if so, can y'all share an example of why that was so impactful for them?
Yeah. For United Way, we have coffee and quality. And so it's evaluation and data capacity building with nonprofits and individuals. And in the coffee and quality space, we have this virtual session that goes wide on a variety of topics, right? But one of the sessions we share probably the most has been, are you collecting too much data? And so it's like this decision tree of really all the things that Rachel was talking about of like, are you using it to report to a funder? Are you using it for decision making? Are you using it to improve the work that you're doing? Like it goes through these like 5 points, right? To help you like feel comfortable with like, oh, I don't really need to collect this, and gives you almost that internal permission to be like, let's stop collecting this because nobody's using it. It has there's the opportunity cost that it's actually more taxing on staff and clients to actually provide it. And so it was through that we've actually like heard from quite a few of like our nonprofit partners or people in our space of like using that decision tree to help them feel better about like walking away from some of their metrics. And then I think too, that's like the space for us where we have some case studies where we work with nonprofits and Kinder Institute for Urban Research out of Rice University for this, like for them to like answer questions that they have with their own data. And it was actually Angel Reach, our very first nonprofit. They're this amazing organization up in Montgomery County who does supports like, yes, I know. Shout out to Angel Reach, who support youth that are transitioning for foster adoption care, all kinds of great stuff. But they were like, they have this matrix they were using, they were collecting this housing information. And it really was for them, maybe not necessarily like, let's walk away from that, but actually let's focus more in on individual goals. Because we really want to see like, what does success look like for our participants? Because it looks different for them. And they have these like 7 indicators of success that were helping kind of guide some of their like, does this fit? Does it not fit? But like really narrowing into like, we want to understand what success means at this individual goal space. And that, that narrows into them and what mattered to them as an organization. And they didn't have any funder around them, like saying, we need this, we have to have this. It gave them that opportunity to use their like internal know-how, do-how to figure out like what really was going to matter to them when they were looking at like what their success meant for their participants.
That's great. I wish that coffee and quality program was around when I first started in this world and could really wrap my head around understanding quantitative versus qualitative and summative and formative and all of those things that I now am like, oh, yes, that makes so much sense. Back then, I had no clue.
Thinking I kind of want the decision tree. That sounds like a really useful tool.
Yeah, we made this like 18-day declutter thing too. Cause like I love Pinterest. Like I could stay on Pinterest all day long. And you see those like declutter challenges.
Yes.
Right now the team's doing like a gratitude challenge. And somebody gave like one of those gratitude charts where it's like every day, it's like, what's your favorite TV show you're grateful for? I don't know. But so it has that too. So I think it's like, how do you make things like approachable for stuff and normalize, like we talk about data all the time. Evaluation is not this like mythical thing. Like this is stuff you do every day. You care about the work you're doing. And so like just consider like the information that you're getting and considering.
So kind of piggybacking off of that, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see in impact reporting? And you wish that people would just understand that it isn't a mythical thing. It is something that you're already doing, but we just need to put words around it and do it better.
2 things come to mind. Really bad charts and graphs that are hard to understand what the key message is. Like data visualization is really, really important. There's someone who works a lot in the evaluation space. Stephanie Evergreen has a lot of tip sheets and guidelines and resources. And so, but you can read any data visualization. It's just really basics of design. And so being mindful, giving your report to a non-technical audience, someone who is not familiar with the program, and asking them to read it. Frequently ask my husband, hey, will you lay eyes on this just from a cold read? I have a friend who works in a different space, and I'll be like, well, yeah, does this make sense to you? What are the key takeaways? And I'm hoping her takeaways are what I was hoping she would take away. That, and then I would say the other thing, forgetting about stories. So we so often get caught up and everyone wants to measure and quantify things, and they think that quantitative data is more valuable. And it's not. When it comes to impact, I think it's pairing the number with the story. Because if you can put someone's face on that impact, people are going to remember the child impacted by a program, the adult who is in a more stable and thriving situation. And so I think making sure that you include the stories in a way that elevates your project and kind of helps people see that snapshot or that picture of this is what we're really doing. We're not just measuring things or delivering services, but we're changing lives. And so I think it's the balance of the two.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll agree with all of that. Oh, yes, and that all day long. I think there is this how do you make the complex simple? And I think this is what I really appreciate about you, Allison, and the way you talk about grant writing is how are you speaking really truth to what it is you're doing in a way that your reader can quickly understand it, quickly get it. And it's not for a lack of a better way, it's not flowery, jargony. No, it's true state of what it is you're really doing. And I think that's how do you find that mix? And really and now with generative AI, sometimes that even gets a little bit more swaying into like, but is that really what y'all do? Because as somebody with fresh eyes into something, like you can tell when something is really not something you do. And so it's like trying to find like, how do you make that complex simple for yourself? And like, it's easy to get somebody's attention, but how do you get them to understand what you're doing, to remember it, and then to bring it into action? Like, I always think about that. And that's the pitfall that we have if we're not using data in a way that will like bring it into action. And that could be yes, the numbers, but also the stories and like, how do those things go together? Because when we are communicating our data, we've really shifted into interpreting data. Like we've analyzed it and now we're interpreting it. And so we're applying meaning into that. And like, that's the gear we have to shift into to consider, because if not, it's like riddled with like pitfalls and horror stories.
That is so good. I used to be of the mindset before storytelling became a really big piece of grants and everything. I used to think just the facts, Jack. Like, I just want the facts and I want to be able to share that information. But really, if you think about how you get people to understand your work and you're just talking to them, you're giving so much of both qualitative and quantitative. And you might not say 67% of our people do X, Y, and Z as measured by, you know, you're putting the story around and you're telling someone's personal growth that has happened along the way. And I think sometimes we can get stuck in, well, the formula says I need to state things like this. But the reality is the formula is there to help you make decisions, but it's not what's going to really hook, line, and sink someone in, right? You're going to really have to make yourself memorable, and storytelling and using impact and metrics is going to help you do that. It's just a matter of being able to tell your story well, I think.
Allison, I would add to that. I think audience also really matters. And so making sure that you're communicating your evidence, your impact, your metrics in ways that are appropriate for the audience. And so like we look at we have a list of like 10 or 11 different ways that we can communicate findings. And, it's working with our partners to say, like, what's appropriate for this audience? Is it a presentation? Is it a 1-minute video clip? Is it a slide deck and an executive summary style report? Is this someone who needs a really technical report and that's what they're looking for? And so really trying to be mindful of who the audience that we're sharing information with is, and that it's accessible to that audience. Because the last thing that I ever want to do or I ever want a client to do is to feel that I'm either talking down to them or talking over them. And so really working to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think too, as there should be, there's a lot of time spent on like, how are we collecting this? What are we collecting? How are we analyzing it? How is it like going back into that like funding cycle, that world? Like we spend a lot of time in that space. I don't think we spend enough time talking about communicating data and communicating impact and what that means for the organization. Like such a missed opportunity as a sector. And I love like audience considerations, hands down, yes. Like, let me tell you, the first time I presented data at an advisory board meeting, right? And I was like deer in headlights, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe. But now going into like a board of United Way of Greater Houston and being able to like, here's the like 2 things I really need y'all to hear of like outcomes and what we're doing. And like, let's have forward thinking conversations on what does this mean moving forward? Like, how do you leverage that for action? And I think that's the space where it's like, how do we bring that up more and normalize that need?
I could talk to y'all forever about this topic just because I think it's so needed. And I think that a lot of nonprofits feel a little overwhelmed by the idea of metrics and what does that really mean. And so to close out, what is one piece of advice that you could give to the nonprofits that are like, y'all, it is just me. I'm a one-man shop here. I'm doing it all. Or maybe I'm a 2 or 3 person shop. We're doing it all. We don't even know where to start with this. Could y'all give some advice on what, if you could do all of the things, what is the most important thing that they should do?
So I'm going to double down on logic model theory of change. Know your program and know how you think it's working and what it's contributing to. And I will say, have that, but also have that in a visual, in a sketch, and also in a 60-second elevator pitch. Because you never know when you're going to be with someone who could become a volunteer, a supporter, a funder, who may need services. And so to have that logic model theory of change and to be able to communicate it in a variety of ways, because then it becomes your North Star for, do I collect this? Do I not? Do we do this thing or add this service or do we not? And so can be very versatile and used so many different ways.
I yes, and I love a small organization. I think that they are just it's amazing that like that when you are the one person, two person show and like you have so many strengths and so many opportunities that in a big shop, even a medium sized nonprofit, you just don't like there's layers of approval, layers of things that have to happen that you don't have that in a one person show. Like you get to say you have that like ability. And so for me, and it's not the like most glamorous thing, but my biggest piece of advice, and it goes to like my favorite little motto, which is like be kind to your future self, document
Yeah.
document it, what you are doing. Have like if you know you have these 5 outputs and this 2 outcomes that you report to that one funder who just has all the faith and belief in you, document that, know how you get that, where you get that, like the data dictionary, documentation for procedures for analysis and reporting, like be kind because you are busy. You are living it. You are doing all of the things that Rachel was talking about and like trying to cultivate it, trying to do the work. And like time's going to pass and you're going to be like, but wait, how did I get that? How did I say I was going to report that? Like document your process. You know what you're doing. And this maybe is a space where like leverage a little like generative AI and like different tools that help just document your process as you do it in your laptop. Like leverage some of that so you can just get it down on paper. So then as you grow as an organization, you already have that as a starting point and a solid foundation for going forward.
Process documentation is so important. Even if it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It doesn't have to be Roman numeral 1.2
Yeah.
4 5 6. It can be as simple as I did this because this is how, and this is the why.
Yeah.
If that's all you have time for, at least you've got it written down and then you can figure out the rest, right? And so someone else can either pick up and help you along the way, or you're not having to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do y'all have any other like, man, I wish I would have said this things? Feel free. Otherwise, we will wrap it up and continue on.
I really just appreciate you for like elevating this topic and especially in like our nonprofit sector and like the importance of this. And we do fixate right on the quantitative, the outputs, the outcomes. The qualitative side of it is just as important. And that's the space too, where like that just gives you the context. That gives that extra color and clarity into what you're seeing and the number of clients you serve and the change in behavior that you're seeing after they come to your program. Like putting those two together really can help you magnify all that you're doing for people who want to support your mission. So kind of thinking of it as that is like people want to be a part of what you're doing. And so how can you bring these two things that you know because you're doing the work to the folks that want to support you?
Yeah, that's good.
I would just say thank you. Like it was so much fun. I was a little nervous at first, but talking about evaluation and impact, it's a lot of fun. And that's what I will tell people. Don't be afraid to talk to your evaluator or to an evaluator, because like we love this stuff and this is what we nerd out on. And like you can nerd out on the nonprofit work, the direct services, and it's playing to strengths. And we want like it. We are evaluation and impact is not a gotcha. It's a like let's help you tell your story better. And so always kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
Y'all are the absolute best. And I really feel like people should have a Jessica and Rachel in their life to really just download and decompress about data questions and things like that. And my life has become so much richer and fuller for knowing both of you. And I'm so grateful that you are here to share your insights and really reminding everyone that data isn't just numbers, it's the stories, it's the people, and it's the progress that you're making.
Yeah.
So if you're listening and want to start measuring your organization's impact more meaningfully, we've put together a free resource just for you, and it is called our Impact Metrics Checklist, hoping that will at least give you a starting point to make sure that you know where you're going and what you're doing and how to do it well. If today's episode inspired you, please subscribe and leave a review and share it with a colleague and a friend who's also working to turn grants into greater impact. I am Allison Boyd, and this is Grant the Mic. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and keep measuring what matters.